Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa McCracken with the Kentucky Pollution Prevention Center, and I'm here as a facilitator for today's session. We're so glad to have you joining us for the Sustainable Distilleries and Wineries Roundtable session. This is actually the second session of a partnership between EPA Region 3 and Region 4, where we're just talking about some different topics. You'll note that there's a poll up. We just wanted to get an idea maybe of how many of you are working with distilleries, so kind of giving a little bit of time for people to come up and join us. So if you would please answer the poll related to what you're doing. I also would be taking this time to welcome Pam Swingle with EPA Region 4, who is the P2 project officer, but unfortunately Pam is not feeling well today, and we're hoping that she's doing well. She is on the line, but she has lost her voice. So what she would be saying is that this has been a joint effort with Region 3 and Region 4, and we just wanted to give a chance. We were hoping to have an in-person roundtable. Obviously, that did not happen, but I think because of that, we have more people who are able to join. So let's take a look, see where we are with the poll. So for today, we are going to be covering 3 different initiatives, the first being with Tennessee, with a Green Spirits Initiative, then Kentucky, Sustainable Spirits and Brewing Initiative. Now, we aren't focusing on brewing today because we felt like there's been a lot of attention to brewing. So this is more focused on distilleries and also wineries, and that brings in Delaware, who has a winery initiative. And lastly, and it's saving the best for last maybe, is we have Adrian Mobilia with Salted Vines Winery, who has been working with the University of Delaware, and he's going to be talking a little bit of what they've done related to the initiative. So we're really happy to have them joining us and hearing from the actual doers. Lastly, we'll have a wrap up and adjourn, and you will be hearing Christina Bitten throughout today because she is taking questions and answers. We're going to have about a 5-minute question session that's built into each of the different topics, but at the end we'll just open it up for all Q&A. So let me go ahead. I'm going to throw this over to Meredith with ERG, who's helping behind the scenes, making sure we're running smooth. Meredith?
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. As Lisa said, my name is Meredith Ouderson, and I'm part of the webinar technical support team at ERG, which is a contractor supporting this series. So as we get started, let's just review a few quick housekeeping items. Audio is available for this presentation through your computers, mic and speakers, or by telephone. And your call-in number, as well as your access code, are in the control panel on the right-hand side of your screen if you need those. All attendees have currently been muted to minimize background noise, and this webinar is being recorded. As Lisa said, we'll have several panelists today giving a short talk about their work, and we'll introduce them in just a moment. If you have a question during the presentation, please type it into the questions box on the upper right-hand side of your screen, and questions can be targeted to a specific panelist or more broadly to all of the panelists. We are planning to answer 1 or 2 questions at the end of each panelist's talk, and then we'll have a longer question and answer session at the end of the webinar. If you're experiencing any technical issues, please contact me via the chat box, and I will do my best to troubleshoot the issue with you. So that's everything I have for housekeeping, and I'll turn it back over to Lisa now.
Okay, just wanted to make the notation that the session is being recorded. And so we will, that will be posted on EPA's website, and when that time comes, there will be an email sent out to everyone who's in attendance. Okay, so maybe let's close the poll now and see what the results are.
So here are the results. So it looks like we have about 33% currently working with distilleries, 27% currently working with wineries, and then about 40, almost half of you considering working with one of those two, and then some miscellaneous.
Okay, so glad to have everybody here. And I know personally from my work at KPPC, even though you've been doing something, you always have something else to learn. So hoping everybody gets that opportunity today to learn something that you can take back into the field with you. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mark Valencia with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, who's going to talk about the Green Spirits Initiative.
Great, thank you. Let's get this going. Can we all see that just fine?
Yes, looks good.
Perfect. So thank you all for having me today. My name is Mark Valencia. I'm with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices. This is I'm in one of the very few non-regulatory side of things within TDEC. And what we do is a lot of sustainability and working with the states, public sector, private sector, across the board throughout Tennessee. This is just a little brief background on TDEC. This is our environmental regulatory side for the state. TDEC is broke down into two main groups, the Bureau of Environment and the Bureau of Parks and Conservation. The Bureau of Environment is more of our regulatory side where we, enforce water, air, pollution, solid waste, things like that. And then the Bureau of Parks and Conservation is where we do a lot of our state park system and our state natural areas. And then you can see the little breakdown between that. The Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices kind of sits between these two big groups because we work across the board. We don't do any enforcement, but we work with virtually every department within TDEC. The Bureau of Parks and Conservation, we have 56 state parks, 85 state natural areas, and a lot of what we're doing over there is protecting and preserving our land. Bureau of Environment, like I said, this is just going back to, we do a lot of the enforcement side of things over at the Bureau of Environment. We also produce some grants and loans, and we do a lot of stuff related to sustainability and education. This is the Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices. I gave you guys a brief background on our office. And within the Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices, we have three separate teams. So we have the business team, the community team, and the state governments and institutions team. The program that I'll be talking about today, Tennessee Sustainable Spirits, falls within our business team because we're working with mainly private businesses within the state. And this just gives you a brief background of what we do over at Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices. The Tennessee Sustainable Spirits is a voluntary program that assists wineries and wine growers, breweries, distilleries in increasing sustainability by promoting best practices, providing technical assistance, and developing relationships. So we work with any spirits producer within this state. I know we're not going to be talking about breweries today, but they are a group that we work with within this program. The Tennessee Sustainable Spirits program is a free membership program to any spirits producer within the state. You have to meet a certain sustainability criteria to become a program member, and I'll go into the details with that on the next slide. But with this membership, you get unique branding, so you have that unique logo, as you can see on the slide, that you can display proudly within your organization and display it to your customers. We have a website, so we do a lot of website recognition of all our members. We have a map, an interactive map showing where they are and what kind of things they have going on. We're working on producing articles for our members and distributing that to anyone who would like to share those articles, and also on our website. One of the big things we like to push is we provide free technical assistance to our members. So we do provide recommendations within a sustainability report that we create for our new members. And if they would like to pursue any of those recommendations, we can help providing them with some of that technical assistance for those recommendations. Even if they have questions that may not be related to the recommendations we made, if it falls in line with sustainability, we are more than happy to help them and find the resources they need. And we do provide a lot of online resources at our website, so anyone can have access to it. It's not just for the members, and it's a great resource for any spirits producer or anyone with a small business interested in improving their sustainable practices. Some of the unique branding items that you get as a member include that middle picture. In the item in the middle is a window cling, so you can display that through your storefront, showing that you're a member of the Tennessee Sustainable Spirits Program. The item on the left is actually a bottle hanger. So this is something that you can hang on the bottle of a beer bottle, a wine bottle, whiskey bottle, and it's promoting the program, and it has the website information, and it also is printed on seed paper, which once you're done using it, you can actually put that into the soil, and wildflowers can grow from it. And then the other item on the right is a coaster made of 100% recycled rubber from tires. To become a member, there's certain things that they have to fulfill. So there's a checklist system that we've created. And on this checklist, it's broken down by water conservation, air water pollution, waste reduction, community involvement, and some education. And with that, there are 49 elements. There's 49 different elements you can check off on the checklist, and you need a minimum of 25 of them to become a member. Now, a thing that I like to push with potential members, that a lot of them will go through the checklist and believe that they do not have 25. Most of the times, they're very close and we can get them there. And I've had several where they didn't believe they can become a member at all. And after visiting their facility and talking to them, we're able to get them there quite easily. So this is something that's designed early on to get people into the program. And much like most sustainability certification programs, we like to think that this program will evolve and become more stringent as more technology comes out and things like that. So to become a member, there's a pretty easy application process. The potential member will submit an application. They will be required to submit their utility data and their production data. And the utility and production data is something that we use to compare how many gallons of wine does it take, or how many gallons of water does it take to produce 1 gallon of wine. So it's mainly just a ratio to normalize the data of water usage versus production, and the same goes to electricity use. And with that's something that we like to show where they stand amongst their peers in the country and throughout the world. So we have some data available from other organizations that can show where they stand. So with that data, you also are required to submit a checklist. So there's 3 main things that we're looking: the application, utility protection data, and your checklist. Once we receive all that, we will do a review of all the information that we got, and I'll follow up with them to see if they're missing anything. During that time, we will work with people within our TDEC to make sure they are in compliance with if there's anything that they are falling under regulatory requirements. And if they're not, they cannot become a member. But if it doesn't mean that they are permanently banned, we're more than willing to work with them to make sure they're in compliance, and then we can move forward with the application process. So this is something, like I said, the Office of Policy and Sustainable Practices, we're not in the business of telling people what to do. And we want to make sure this program is designed specifically for our members, and it's something that's an added benefit to them. So we want to make sure we're doing what we can to help them and also, improve the environment. Once we get all that information, we'll reach out to the member. We'll schedule an on-site visit with them. And this on-site visit, it's not super formal. What we're trying to do is we're going to go over the checklist together at their facility, walk through their facility, and just make sure everything that's checked is actually there, and maybe find potential items that they're doing that they didn't check off. Most of the times I can find additional checks that they can check off on the checklist that they just did not recognize. And it's a great way to get a feel for what's going on in the facility. And this is where we gather additional information to make our report with those list of recommendations. So once we get that sustainability report written up, we submit it to the new member and we accept them into the program. And we usually do an annual, not this year, but annually, we like to have a new member welcome ceremony. So all the new members for that year, we'll have the commissioner come down, we'll present them with their certificates, and we'll have just, a great way to promote what they're doing. And this is another way where we utilize our own ways to get the words out. So, we submit a lot of our new members list and articles out to local media outlets, and usually a media outlet will pick it up every time we do it. This is just an overview of the checklist. I'm not going to go through every single thing, but you can see from the checklist, it's super easy. It's literally, you just check it off. You can either use it as a PDF file, or you can check it off with a pen and paper. And you can see how it's broken down from water, air, waste. And then if we keep going, you can see the energy, sourcing, community, and maintenance. So we're trying to go across the board within the organization on how they can improve sustainability throughout the program. Next steps for our program, we're trying to increase membership. Much like membership programs, we're always looking for new members, so we do a lot of outreach. We're in the early stages of planning our webinars and our roundtables for this coming year. So just the other day, we sent out a postcard to every single producer within the state, and we're hoping to see, and with the postcard, it's a survey to understand what they would like to see in this next year for webinars and roundtables. And after about 2 weeks, we're going to go back and shoot an email and see if we're getting what may be more beneficial. Was the postcard more beneficial, or was the email more beneficial for receiving a survey respondents? So it's a quick little experiment. We're trying to see what is the best way to communicate with producers within our state. We're also looking for additional resources for members. So we're always putting our ear to the rails, looking out for new technologies, new best practices, things like that across the board. I know we're not talking about beer right now, but a thing that was big for a while was CO2 capture. So capturing that CO2 that's fermented off from brewing beer. That can easily be applied to the distilling side. And if you're producing enough, you could either resell that CO2 or use it for some other equipment that you have going on within your facility. So we're always looking for new resources like that. We're always talking to the colleges within Tennessee and outside of the state, and working with the local guilds and organizations to see what's coming around the bend in terms of new technologies and best practices for the distilling and winemaking industry. We're also working on our website to produce resources for consumers. So this is a way for, if we have, nowadays, most younger consumers are looking for more sustainable businesses. So what we're trying to do is be able to provide resources for them on our website to show what to look for when they're looking for a green business. And we're designing it specifically for spirits producers within the Tennessee Sustainable Spirits Program. Another thing that we're really trying to work on, and I'd like to thank Mark Toda and the folks over in Kentucky with, they're very great at doing the value stream mapping, and we're looking to try to apply those practices within our program. And I think I have a quick little sketch to show you what we're talking about, value stream mapping, but that's something that we're trying to do in the future with our program. And it's just an added benefit and an added resource for our members. It's something that normally a producer doesn't have the time to do. I remember when I attended a workshop for value stream mapping with Kentucky, the producers, they're talking about, yeah, we look at the electricity bills, we look at our water consumption, but that's about it. They don't have the time to literally walk through their facility and see where all these water taxes and energy taxes are coming from. They don't know specifically how much energy is used to run that one pump for an hour. So what we're trying to do is show them physically those numbers of where the largest energy and water taxes are on their system.
Hi, Mark. I just want to let you know you have about 5 minutes left.
Thank you. Our pilot program, we had 4 members, so this is what helped shape our program. We had Jackalope Brewing, Keg Springs Winery, Short Mountain Distilling, and Life is Brewing. So 2 breweries, a winery, and distillery. We wanted to work across the board of producers to make sure that we are working with all the industry. Some of our new members is Tennessee Distilling, East Nashville Beer Works, and we just accepted 2 more members, Chattanooga Whiskey and a Arrington Vineyards Winery. So we that's pretty much the pilot program. A quick overview of some of our members. Jackalope Brewing, we can skip that. We'll go to Keg Springs Winery. So Keg Springs Winery, some of the things that they have going on at their facility is they have a rooftop solar system, so they're actually offsetting some of the electricity use at their facility with that. They have an on-site composting program, so all the stems and skins from the winemaking process is used for composting. We actually had to work with them because early on the pH was too low to create a really nice compost mix. So we worked with people within TDEC. We have experts in composting help help steer them towards the right kind of formula for their particular scenario. Short Mountain Distillery, they do a lot of locally sourced ingredients. They do some pretty cool water conservation programs within their facility, and they do a lot of recycling. So if you see the picture on the far right, they actually will recycle bottles that are returned to them into new products. So that on the right there, you can see they've made candles out of whiskey bottles. Life is Brewing, well, it's another brewery. We can skip that, but they've been doing a lot of stuff over there. They do a lot of on-site pre-treatment of their water, which is super helpful. We like to work with producers to make sure if they're going to discharge anything, it's meeting requirements. So value stream mapping, I'm sure Mark Toto may discuss this or anyone else over in Kentucky, but what we're looking at over here is we're starting from grain to virtually glass. So to get that grain from that truck over to that silo, there's some kind of a electric motor and pump or an auger pushing that grain to the silo. So how long does that motor run? How long does it take for that motor to run to completely empty that unloading process and into the silo? So we have that time. Like we can go out there and get a stopwatch and actually figure out how much time that takes, and then we can look at the specifics of that particular motor. And that's where we can show you exactly how much electricity is being used for that one particular process. So this is a brewing side of things, but what we're trying to show is we're looking at all the utilities associated with this in particular. So, we have electric motors, we have maybe a gas furnace or a gas boiler to heat up some kind of product, you have water going in, and electricity running pumps. So we want to be able to look at all those throughout the process. And that's what we're trying to do with the value stream mapping program. And we're taking a lot of pointers from Kentucky, which is super helpful for us on helping to develop our program with that. That's pretty much my presentation. So if you all have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Perfect timing, Mark. And yes, quite a few questions have come in. So Tina, do you want to go ahead and address the questions?
Thank you, Mark, for your presentation. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Christina Bitton, and I'm a Pollution Prevention Coordinator and Project Officer with EPA Region 4. I'll be moderating the Q&A portions of today's webinar. Yep, Mark, we have a few questions. The first question is, have you come across facilities in this industry with compliance issues, and are there any compliance issues that come up during the process?
I have not come across any compliance issues within any of our members or any of the background checks we've done. It's not to say that there isn't any, we just haven't come across any. And the other thing is most of these producers aren't doing a lot of compliance practices. So, not a lot of them have Title V permits for air pollution or discharge permits if they're doing a high amount of discharge. So other than that, we have some of our members actually have Title V permits and water permits, but for the most part, we haven't ran into any outstanding issues with any of our members.
Great, thank you. Next question is, what are the main wastes that these facilities generate?
The main waste, is that what I heard?
Correct.
The main waste, there's two big from what we see. There is the packaging materials. So a lot of producers, they get a lot of packaging materials, whether it's pallets, cardboard boxes, plastic wrap, and then the containers that they use to fill their product with. And then on the production side, particularly for distilleries, it's usually a slurry, which is it's a liquid mix with a bunch of solids after the distilling process, after they ferment out their product. And a lot of them usually do have a big struggle with managing that particular waste stream because it's a liquid and it's pretty heavy and you can't just discharge it. So a lot of them work with local farmers to use this as a feed source. But I like to emphasize that we recommend that you talk to TDEC and agriculture with applying this type of product to a feedstock. I mean, it's perfectly fine to do it, but we want to make sure it's not running off into other people's properties or down the drains when you distribute this out to your livestock.
Great, thank you. We have time for one more, and it's, are you aware of any movements within the state to expand the ability for businesses to sell carbon credits for more than just reforesting arable land?
I have not personally heard about that within TDEC. Who's this? I can't say if it is or it isn't. I just haven't heard it. There may be, but unfortunately, I haven't heard it on my side.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mark. And I know there are a few more questions too, and we'll look to address those at the end of the session. So right now we'll move ahead to Kentucky, and Robin Whitted is going to be first up to talk about the Sustainable Spirits and Brewing Initiative in Kentucky. And then also, as Mark mentioned, Mark Toda with KPBC is going to be speaking about the sustainable value stream map that Kentucky has been working on with its clients. And also Samantha Gordon is going to be talking about calculators that we've developed. So we thought in this session, we would get a little more in depth with some of the tools available. Okay, Robin?
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. My name is Robin Whitted. I work within the Division of Compliance Assistance within our Energy and Environment Cabinet. As you can see on the title screen here, I have a very long-winded job title. So I coordinate the state's environmental leadership program, which is called Kentucky Excel. And then I'm also a pollution prevention specialist. For our Sustainable Spirits Initiative, I know I don't need to explain sustainability to anyone on this call. You guys could probably actually, in many ways, I could learn from you on hearing your sustainability and how you talk about it. But spirits is actually kind of something very unique, or that Kentucky is very well known for. Spirits actually, when applied to an alcohol, is a strong distilled liquor, such as brandy, whiskey, gin, rum, or bourbon, which is big here in Kentucky. Now, I'm not sure if anyone knows where the term spirits comes from. It actually stems from medieval times, alchemy from the Middle East. And with the Middle Eastern alchemy, they were focused more on medicinal elixirs. So as you distill, you get a vapor, and that's what they considered the spirit of the original product or material. Now, our initiative has been going on since 2011. So before I even started with the division. And the way it started was the Distillers Association here in Kentucky, the members of the industry, and even some consultants came and said, you know, DCA, we need to have something where we bring members of the spirits industry together to talk and share about experiences related to current things that are going on in the environment that everyone in this industry is experiencing, and then also help shape future opportunities for everyone within this industry. That's how our Sustainable Spirits Summit was born. And on this screen, you can actually see a picture from one of our very first summits hosted by the Woodford Reserve Distillery. Over the years, we've had multiple different hosts, as you can see on the screen. The first Sustainable Spirits Summit was actually hosted by Wild Turkey in Lawrenceburg. And over the years, we have talked from everything ranging from water quality, spent grains, energy efficiency, distillers mold, the list goes on and on. And if you guys are curious about what we've covered at these events over the years, there's a link here that you can go to our Sustainable Spirits webpage, and it has the summaries from the original ones back before I started with DCA or working with this, and then the more recent ones there's actually the programs from the events. And in the center here is a picture of one of those programs. Originally, the summits were just half-day events, really small, maybe 10 people attending. And of course, with us being Kentucky, there was a strong emphasis on distilleries. But the Sustainable Spirits Initiative here in Kentucky, it's not just distilleries. We also work with breweries, we work with wineries. So we've had multiple different representatives attend from those different sectors of our summits. In 2017 was the first one that I actually helped organize. And when I sat down to talk to the people that we coordinate with this with, so industry associations, things like that, they suggested, why don't we do a full day event? It's like, hey, that sounds good. Let's expand it to full day instead of just a half day event. We ironed out an agenda, started coordinating. It all came together just magically, perfect. And it ended up being the biggest Sustainable Spirits Summit that we have had until that date. We had 65 attendees, where previously we were lucky to have 20 attendees to the summits. Now, we also, with the expanded time frame, we had more attendees, more types of attendees, meaning additional government people were attending, or representative universities would come and participate. And then we'd also have more private sector, like consultants, come and attend. For marketing the event, we developed a bunch of different digital ways of doing this, flyers, postcards, social media, blog posts, and those were distributed by the associations, which is Kentucky Distillers Association, the Guild of Brewers here in Kentucky. We also worked with other government entities like the Kentucky Wine Council, which is in our Department of Agriculture, and then our communications team within the cabinet. And then a lot of the consultants actually recommended people attend. I kind of wanted to go over a few things that I've learned over the years coordinating this event. First things first, never be afraid of new ideas. Yeah, sometimes they won't work out, but when they do, it's amazing. For example, the new idea of just going from a half-day event to a full-day event. Phenomenal. You also need to make sure that you understand the host location and the unique attributes. For example, in this screen here, you have a picture of the summit from 2018 hosted by Angel's Envy Distillery in Louisville. As you can see, this is a distillery floor. It was the only room big enough to hold the 80 attendees for that event. It was a little noisy. You could say it was great for the ambience, hearing bourbon being made in the background, but even with microphones and a wonderful sound system, a lot of people had a hard time hearing this, all the speakers. And I admit, I was actually kind of mortified when my cabinet secretary came up and started speaking, and he started having feedback with his hearing aids. So lots of squealing going on. So every site, you have to know what to expect or kind of know about these things going in. And sometimes due to that, you have to adjust how you do the event. For example, with the one at Old Forester in 2019, the facility could not offer the tour during the evening. We always do a facility tour associated with the summits, and it's usually the last thing you do for the day. For their operating schedule, because they have a lot of tours going on, seeing this facility throughout the day, it worked best for them to have it at the very beginning. Okay, sounds great. Let's try this. Let people come in, free format tour at their own leisure. It sounded great. It worked great for the facility, but it kind of, to me, felt like we were getting off on the wrong foot at that summit because people just didn't arrive at one time. And a lot of them actually arrived after even the first presentations were coming through. So great idea. And it was something to help the facility out as they helped us out, but it didn't work right. Also, as you get larger events like this, you have to think about how are you going to facilitate discussion. When you have an event that's 80, 100 people, people are not going to be as open to respond to a large crowd about topics related to energy, spent grains, or anything else that goes on. They'll have those conversations on the sidelines as you network, but you're not going to be able to logistically have an effective large group discussion. Now, those little side discussions will produce a lot of interesting results. And as you get the feedback from your attendees, always be open-minded. Sometimes the feedback, like for this event here at Angels Envy, a lot of people complained about the noise, but that is something that was outside of your control. So just be open-minded. And as you read them, some of your best ideas will actually come from the feedback. For example, during our first couple of summits, one thing that kept on being noticed by everyone attending is that our distilleries and breweries and wineries were doing all types of great things, but no one knew about it. These stories were going unheard. So for 2 years, all the facilities came together and coordinated and collaborated to create this booklet that I'm showing you here. It is just success stories of what they are doing. Heaven Hill Brands designed it, put it together, and published it. And it was distributed to all the visitor centers or all the locations on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail. So people could go, international people, as they come and visit from different states, going around and seeing these distilleries, they could see and read what they're going, the untold success stories and what they are doing for the environment. We've also helped out with technical assistance. This comes in a variety of ways: emails, phone calls, and site visits. If you look to the far left, you will actually see my predecessor, the guy in blue, John Eisenmenger, talking to some people representing Woodford Reserve back in 2012. And then in the middle, you will see it's a brewery called West 6. And this is a brewery in which it's kind of a superstar for our brownfields. It is a success story, and from brewery to brownfields. And you're probably going, why are we talking breweries? This isn't a brewery talk. Well, we have a lot of distilleries that have also gone from brownfields to distilleries. Doesn't have quite the same ring as brownfields to breweries, but just wonderful things. And actually at the Angels Envy Summit, one of our oldest and most fond brownfield coordinators, who was about to retire, actually gave a speech about how Angels Envy was one of his first brownfield sites. So he started with Angels Envy and retired at Angels Envy. It was a very touching moment for all of us within the cabinet. You also have—
Hi, Robin, sorry, this is Lisa. We have 10 minutes left in the session, so might be time to wrap this part up so we can move on to Mark.
Yes, ma'am, I know. You also have in the top right-hand corner where we facilitated site visits with Four Roses and their different locations. And they received that technical assistance so wonderfully that they invite us back routinely to help out with their litter pickup and river sweeps. Now, Four Roses is a member of Kentucky Excel, which is the state's environmental leadership program. And through the Sustainable Spirits Initiative, we've actually been able to recruit multiple people or industries, organizations from the sector to become members of Kentucky Excel, like this one here, Maker's Mark. Maker's Mark is what we consider a master member, which is our highest level of membership within Kentucky Excel. And the photos here actually show where they hosted a field trip and talked about all the things that they were doing at Maker's Mark. The most interesting element or part that everyone really liked the best was actually them talking about how they do solar landscaping. And that's seen in the top left photo. We also did a bunch of different roundtables, workshops, and webinars. This is the workshop that Mark, the previous speaker, was actually talking about, that we hosted or held, talking about sustainable value stream mapping. And you can see Mark in a couple of these photos. You can also see in the top photo, Samantha Gordon from the Kentucky Pollution Prevention Center. This is her first week on the job, or second week on the job, and they did a phenomenal job of helping us coordinate this workshop. Now, these workshops and webinars are coordinated in our Kentucky Pollution Prevention Partnership. So it is something that we come together to do, and from that, we have expanded the Sustainable Spirits Initiative into an additional Sustainable Spirits and Brewing Initiative, which we do in partnership with the Kentucky Pollution Prevention Center. And in addition to the workshops and webinars, this partnership has also developed some additional technical assistance items. Here's a few of the resources that we've developed over the past year. We've got best management practice guides, and for each one of those best management practice guides, we've got a short little video that talks about and introduces the topic of each of those guides, and then infographics that complement each of the guides. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Kentucky Pollution Prevention Center so that they can go in more detail about some of the technical resources that they've developed.
Thanks, Robin. Let me share my screen. Okay, so yeah, like Robin said, I am Samantha Gordon, and we are going to be talking about some tools, and with me from KPPC is also Mark Toda. Okay, so a little bit about KPPC if you're not familiar. We are based out of the Speed School of Engineering at the University of Louisville. We provide training and technical assistance to business, industry, and organizations throughout the Commonwealth of Kentucky to improve efficiency and sustainability. So a couple of tools that we'll be going over today: a calculator, sustainable value stream mapping, and water balance. So you can find the calculator that I'll be talking about on our website, as well as several other resources. So kind of why we started and why we developed this calculator is that we saw a need for clients in the brewing, spirits, and winery industries that they needed just a quick, easy way to interpret their data, their utility data. So water, natural gas, and electricity. You know, just that centralized spreadsheet that you can look at those and see how it trends over time. And then this great study came out from the Beverage Industry Environmental Roundtable, or BEER, B-I-E-R, that came out with some benchmarks and ratios that facilities can compare themselves to, kind of similar to Energy Star. So let's dive into the calculator. So this is what our calculator looks like. This is the second tab. The first tab is instructions, if you would like to take a look at that. So this is the input tab. This is all the data that's required of our clients to fill this calculator out. So this is a distillery, and for confidentiality reasons, can't say which one, but this is a distillery. They entered their date, and then there's a few pieces of data that you need. So your production, your electric usage, your natural gas usage, water, and then all of the corresponding costs, and that's it. So once you have all of that filled out, then you go to the next tab, and this is the outputs tab, and it calculates three main ratios. So the first one is the energy use ratio, which is total energy consumed divided by production in total liters, and then the water use ratio, so total water consumed per production, again in liters, and then the greenhouse gas emissions ratio, which is your greenhouse gas emissions calculated from your electric power and natural gas, and then of course divided by your total production. So those three ratios are what BEER calculates. So a lot of this is just unit conversions to get into what BEER looks like. So then the last tab is probably one of our favorites, is the figures tab. So you can quickly, we like it because you can quickly identify any anomalies in the data. So for this one, the top row of figures is just your typical energy and water trending over time. And you can see right away, September, something's going on there. So that might be something you want to investigate, right? Then the middle row is the beer ratios, your energy and water use ratios. And the bars are what their ratios were monthly. And then this green line at the top here is the beer number. So you can see for both of these charts that this client is performing better than the beer ratio, which is good. And then the last one is the greenhouse gas emissions, just a pie chart that splits out what the split between electric and natural gas carbon emissions are, and then the corresponding metric tons. Okay. And then the last row is just the cost, another way to look at the data. So then some other main highlights for the calculator is that it helps our clients create a baseline. So you can improve, but you don't measure, right? So this is just a quick and easy way to look at your data and see what's going on. And then you can also benchmark it against your peers through the beer ratio, or you compare internally to see how you're doing over time, or if you have any other facilities that you can compare to. And then one of the big findings from the beer study, as well as what we have seen at KPPC, is that the economies of scale play a pretty big role. So as a result, you can see from this chart that from the distilleries and breweries that we've worked with, the distilleries have been a little bit on the larger side. So you can see that they're doing a little better. So the green thumbs up means that they're performing better than the beer number. The yellow is within 5%, and then the red is performing worse than the beer number. So yeah, the breweries have been on the smaller side, more the craft side. So that's why they're performing a little bit worse. But overall, this tool has been such a great hit with our clients. It's a quick and easy way just to see where they're at, understand what their utility usage is. And if you're interested, here are some of the beer numbers. And then with that, I will flip it over to Mark Toda to talk about sustainable value stream mapping and some of the other tools that we've done.
Yeah, thank you, Samantha. I appreciate that. So where I'd like to start is just to mention one thing on the results that Samantha was just talking about. We do compare with the Beverage Industry Environmental Roundtable, but also here in Kentucky, the Kentucky Distillers Association has collected data specifically for Kentucky companies, and the Kentucky Guild of Brewers has collected data specifically for breweries here in Kentucky. So we're looking at the Kentucky numbers as well, benchmark numbers, which actually are relatively close to the beer numbers also, particularly in the more recent years of 2017 data. But in any event, and we are actually able to look at those companies by size as well, by production quantities. Okay, so one of the things that we do, starting to get into talking about sustainable value stream mapping, is basically what we want to do with that is to look at the various process steps across the top here, from grain unloading to cooking to fermentation, distillation, spirits gauging, and processing. So this is a distillery process here. And we can come up with a similar process for brewing. And we have not done one yet, but we would be very much like to work with wineries as well and look at the process here, develop a process here as well. But just to kind of show you, I'm not going to go into detail into these numbers, but what we're basically doing is listing each of the electrical pieces of equipment. And in this process is primarily motors and pumps that we're looking at. So we're looking at the horsepower of those motors, what's the load factor, what is the duty factor for those motors, and basically how many hours is that piece of equipment running, so that we can calculate for each individual piece of equipment what the, first of all, we'll know what the kilowatt demand is for that piece of equipment, and then we can calculate the kilowatt hours of usage. And these graphs down below here show you what is the total, the top column chart is demand, electrical demand by process step. So you can see the biggest electrical demand is in mill cooking. milling and cooking, because that's where we have some large milling motors that grind the grains. And so that's actually an issue. So it was kind of interesting to see this in this electric diagram. And the kilowatt hours obviously are high as well in mill cooking and also in distillation. So those are our two process steps where that electric energy use is significant. You can go to the next slide, Samantha. So what we do with this sustainable value stream map, what we are trying to do here is looking at these different process steps. And what we're doing is following the product through the process steps. So we start with, bushels of grain coming in here and grain handling. We're adding water actually to the product here. So that's a little different, but this is water being added to the product. Steam gets added to the product too. And so you can see here what we have, the little I in the triangle is inventory. So we're seeing inventory of 13,000 gallons in this particular case. A little bit of water added in fermentation. So that inventory actually goes up just slightly. Then in the distillation process, the alcohol is distilled off. And so we end up with about 1,600 gallons of alcohol here. And that's alcohol that then will go to aging. It's important to note that what we're doing is looking at this value stream map for one mash cooking cycle. So this is only one mash cooking cycle, whereas a company may have 3 or 4 mash cooking cycles per day. And then times 20 or days or whatever in a month, then that becomes a significant amount of alcohol then. But we like to look at this from the standpoint of one batch of mash cooking. Down below, I won't get into a lot of the details, but you can see the very bottom 2 lines are the electrical usage. I'm sorry, the second and third from the bottom. The electrical demand is here, and the electrical usage you can see there by process step. But then what we also want to look at is steam usage. Steam is the very bottom line, because that's going to be natural gas consumption. So we look at steam usage, and in this particular case, the highest is in distillation here. And so we can lay this out. We also look at cooling water, chilled water coming from a chiller that may be on site, and then reverse osmosis water. Where do we add RO water? And so you can see that we're looking at water, electricity, and steam or natural gas usage throughout the process. And so, and I also want to iterate that, what we see as our role is really providing these tools to the company and explaining to them how they can develop these maps themselves, not necessarily doing it for them, but actually providing the tools and training so that they can develop and use these tools and monitor them on a regular basis. You can go to the next slide, Samantha.
Hey, Mark, it's Lissa. We just have a couple minutes left, so
Okay. Yep, thank you so much. I appreciate that. So one of the things that we do like to look at is electric demand. And this is the electric demand. You can see we're starting at midnight on the left-hand side of this graph, and we're going to midnight. So this is basically one day. And you can see around 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning is when we have a high electric demand. And that really comes from those milling motors where we're milling grain early in the morning. You go to the next slide, Samantha. And you can see actually in this particular case, you can see the peak, intermediate, and base time of day periods. This is a time of day customer. And so nice thing about this is that now that milling is happening not in the peak period. So that's nice in the summertime. You can go to the next slide, Samantha. The other thing that we look at, and we're beginning to look at this more in year 2 of the work that we've been doing, is what we call a water balance. And so what we're looking at is the water coming in on the left-hand side. And obviously some of that water is actually going into the product, and it leaves the facility as product coming out the right-hand side. But we also want to monitor the wastewater. This water that's actually going to the sewer. And in many cases, that may not actually be on your water bill or a sewer bill if you have a sewer bill. But you may need to actually meter that. Oftentimes that's metered by an engineering firm that the company may have engaged to monitor the volume and to test that water on a weekly basis. And so in this particular case, that's where this data came from, was from that engineering report. And then we also have water leaving the facility in stillage. As Mark Valencia mentioned in Tennessee, that's a waste product coming out of the distillation process. That's typically in the 30 to 40% moisture range. And so there's moisture leaving the facility there. And the difference is water losses. And so this is a nice thing for facilities to look at to monitor their water use and the losses that are coming out. You can go to the next slide, Samantha. And so what we have done is extended our calculator where we look at production in gallons here again and water use here. And we look at wastewater and stillage coming out of the facility. And then we're able to actually calculate what is our water loss. And so we're calculating the water loss here and then monitoring that as a percentage of water use. And you see it's relatively consistent, although in 2 months here in February and in June, that water loss was significantly less. And so when you get those different anomalies, it's a good opportunity to ask why and to see what can be learned from that. So that's all that I have. Just wanted to show you these tools. And again, we're providing these kind of tools and training to companies to help them to monitor their energy and water use moving forward.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mark, Samantha, and Robin. Let's see, Tina, for time, let's just take, is there one question maybe to go ahead and share, and then we'll catch up at the end?
Yeah, we have a question here. It says, are each of the motors metered separately, or are you calculating the energy use based on how long the motors run?
Yeah, motors could be metered. Particularly larger motors, you might want to consider putting a sub-meter on those. But no, we're calculating that based on the amount of time that the motor is estimated to be running. It actually could be measured too with a stopwatch or whatever. But we work with the companies to determine how much time that motor is running, and then calculate the kilowatt hour use.
Great, thanks, Mark. And for the sake of time, we're going to move forward to the next presentation, but please continue to ask questions. If we cannot answer them live, we will be following up with you individually.
Okay, at this point, I will turn it over to Dr. Keith Goodson, who's with the University of Delaware. He's going to be talking about the winery initiative that they're working on.
Can you see my slides and can you see me? I'm not sure. There we go. There we go. Okay. Hi, this is Professor Keith Goodson from the University of Delaware Industrial Assessment Center, and I'm going to present a little bit of results from some work that we did as part of the P2 program, where our center is primarily performing pollution prevention through the performance of energy audits of local industrial plants. And this was part of the food and beverage program. So as part of our food and beverage statement of work, we did a couple of micro wineries in the area here in Delaware and in Pennsylvania. And so you'll see this isn't particularly well organized, but sort of just jumping into it. This slide here illustrates the two micro wineries had two different sort of cooling system setups. And you'll see in the next slide that that cooling is the major energy consumer of these plants. And the first plant shown, pictorially on the left there, had the fermentation takes and a standard room temperature room kept at somewhere around 70 Fahrenheit by the room HVAC equipment. And, you know, I guess that might be considered more standard, I'm not sure, of these types of plants. And the second plant had the chilled tanks in a room which was itself chilled using the same chiller. And so the first question we wanted to understand, just to provide information from the audits, was which of these two types of plants is more energy efficient. And the two plants are approximately the same size. These are facilities that have on the order of about 30 acres. And so I, you know, it's difficult to make comparisons in terms of square footage because the layouts of the plants is a little bit different. They both had a retail operation going, and but I think we can make a reasonable comparison to the two. So, oh, I should be in slideshow. Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. These are the electric consumption analysis of the two plants. Plant 1 again had the tanks and a standard room temperature room cooled by the HVAC system, while Plant 2 had the tanks in a room that was chilled to about 40 Fahrenheit by the same chiller as supplying the fermentation tanks. You can see from the total electric consumption that the two plants are similar in size. For this number here for Plant 2, to compare properly, we supplied or subtracted the electric heat. That plant had heat pumps in an area, and also some of the retail equipment that you'd be surprised used a lot of electricity. This is a pretty fair comparison of the two plants, and you can see that they are relatively the same size in terms of overall electric consumption. And you can see the breakdown of electric consumption is for space cooling, and in Plant 1, that was about 13.5 kilowatt hours per year, and in Plant 2, about 6,000. The chiller, each plant had a chiller supplying chilled water to the tanks, as well as in Plant 2 to the room evaporators. And that used 18,000 in Plant 1 and 13.8. The circulation pumps, this is actually the primary consumer in these plants apparently, is the chilled water circulation pump because it's running continuously. And so if you add these numbers, you can see the total cooling in each plant and what they are relative to the total electric. They're, of course, the primary consumer. And then on an overall basis, the second plant, which had tanks in the chilled room, had less cooling consumption. And so, you know, while Plant 2 is slightly larger, it actually had a smaller total cooling consumption, and making just a simple comparison based on this, it appears that the configuration of Plant 2, which is having the fermentation tanks in a room which is chilled by the chiller, consumes about 20% less overall electricity. So going forward, we wanted to explore whether adjusting the chiller set point in Plant 2 would result in lower energy consumption. So a data logging experiment was performed where over the course, and this was in August, the course of a few weeks, the chiller set point was adjusted from 35 to 41 degrees and you can see we did the experiment going up and going down to see if we could find some correlation. All the fine, that's the chiller cycling, and so if you do perform averaging, you can see the average chiller consumption as a function of time, and it's very clear that when it's hotter out during the day, the chiller is consuming more electricity than when it's cool at night, and so there's a strong temperature dependence. That makes it a little bit difficult to see what's going on here. I mean, we would have liked to see that, okay, at 35 Fahrenheit, the chiller consumption is one thing, and then as we go to 41, it goes lower. You can put all that data together and plot chiller current versus outside temperature. And what you see is that the result of the experiment was pretty inconclusive, in the sense that adjusting a chilled water temperature really didn't seem to have much of an effect when normalized to the outside temperature. And so what in fact, it's unexpectedly seemed that we got lower chiller consumption with a lower temperature. So any of the variations we're seeing here seem within the noise, and the result of that experiment was that the first order, it didn't seem to matter what the chiller set point was. The main industrial type of recommendation concerns that chiller circulation pump, because it's serving multiple loads. Going back here, the tanks valves turn on and off as chilled water is required, as well as the evaporator, and so there's a variable load on the chiller. And so in principle, we should be able to save a lot of energy by putting the chiller circulation pump on a variable drive. Currently, it's basically on a bypass configuration, so the consumption of the pump is constant. And so we calculated that. In fact, it really wasn't much of a calculation. I mean, we confirmed it with the data, but it was basically a specification from the manufacturer that the annual cost savings can be about 13,000 kilowatt hours, based upon putting on a variable drive and adjusting the speed based upon the differential pressure in the chilled water header. Since the chiller circulation pump consumes about a quarter of the plant electric, this recommendation results in 15% overall plant electric savings. So, I mean, as something to be done on these micro wineries in general, placing the chiller circulation pump on a variable drive, would result in overall, for all these plants that don't have that, 15% electric savings. And you can see here the quote from the manufacturer for parts, and we estimate about $1,500 labor. And that would result in about a 2.5-year payback for the measure. So it's well within the numbers of doing it. Unfortunately, that wasn't done, and the owner-operator is here with us that can provide some context on that. But basically, there were 9 recommendations made, and they were both mostly with regard to lighting and HVAC. And you can see that in addition to the pump recommendation, we could achieve around 15% electric savings, about 18% propane savings through these recommendations. And the payback periods were all in line with relatively low payback time. These are sort of interesting facilities because they have the retail operation, and so one of the perhaps apart from the industrial type recommendation of the chiller circulation pump, There were various recommendations with regard to retail type lighting and HVAC. And in particular, I mean, we data logged a lot of retail type equipment, and like these slushy machines use a lot of electricity. Okay, so in conclusion, for these micro wineries, cooling costs dominate its primary energy consumption. By comparing the two plants we did, our conclusion, which is just based upon the one data point, is that placing the fermentation tanks in a room chilled by the same chiller reduces overall electric consumption by close to 20%. We experimented with adjusting the chiller chilled water set point, and it did not seem to have an effect that we were expecting. So there was no recommendation made there. The main consumer is the chilled water circulation pump, and the recommendation to put on a variable drive would save about 15% off the total plant electric consumption. So it's a good recommendation with payback around 2.5 years. The difficulty was to find an installer after sale. So the message is that for micro wineries setting up operation, you would want to choose this option for a variable drive on the pump when purchased. And the recommendations that were implemented were mainly lighting and HVAC and retail operation based, saved 18% of both electric and propane. And that's all I have on this.
Okay, thank you, Keith. At this point, we will turn it over to Adrian. And as you mentioned, this is the winery that you have been working with, one of them. So Adrian, thank you for being here to share the story, and you know, no judgment. We really love hearing from the folks that we're working with. So please go ahead.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been an interesting morning listening to all this stuff. I think it's great work by everybody. Thank you, Keith, for inviting me to this. I wanted to share a little bit about the process that we went through. In the beginning, I was not going to lie, a little skeptical about why someone wants to come, plug in all these data loggers and all your machines, and they tell you they're from doing a study for the EPA. You get a little bit nervous at first. But as we started talking and got a comfort level, I was like, okay, I see what we're trying to do here. We're trying to do some experiments and understand practices and what we could glean from that to improve the process in the industry. And I think that, his results were spot on, learning about using the chiller to control your production room temperature versus HVAC. While I came to that conclusion for a totally set of different reasons, it was the right decision, obviously. I came to that conclusion because, here in Delaware, our summertime temperatures average in the low 90s to mid 90s pretty regularly. We can even get into the high 90s, low 100s in August. And when you have unfiltered wine that's not yet in the bottle, there are other microorganisms and things that are in the wine that, if allowed to go above a certain temperature, can certainly cause spoilage. And that was my main concern when building the building. And I relayed that information to the HVAC suppliers and engineers, and they kept trying to tell me, well, we'll just use 5 mini splits back there, and you only really need 4, but you'll have one for insurance purposes if one were to fail. And I kept trying to explain to these guys, I need to maintain 55, 60 degrees. Like, can you do that? And they kept saying, yeah. And I knew they couldn't with a heat pump because it's so dependent upon the outside temperature. So finally, I wrote up a little document and put it in front of them and said, I want you guys to sign this. It says, you guarantee I can maintain 60 degrees, every day of every minute, regardless of what outside. And then they kind of said, well, we couldn't even begin to do that. And I go, but that's what you've been telling me for weeks. So I kicked them out and then called the chiller company. And they said, well, we've got blowers that you just hang in there. They're $3,000 a piece. You run your chiller glycol to it just like you would a tank. Has a valve on it. You're good to go. You can make the room 28 degrees if you want year round. So came to that conclusion out of protection of the product, not out of energy consumption in mind, but it turned out to be a good decision. You know, what Keith did in the facility, yeah, we were very surprised to find out that the slushy machines that we use to make our wine slushies, we have 3 of them in the facility, consume a ton of energy. Wasn't really in tune with that, so that was a good find. Obviously, the experiments we did with the chiller to set the chill point was interesting. We would have thought that a higher chill point would have consumed less energy. We really couldn't draw that conclusion. Going to the variable drive circulation pump in the chiller. Yeah, this is a big thing. We're not giving up on this. We just haven't found a electrician or HVAC person who's comfortable touching this. I mean, it's not an extremely complex machine, but it's a 20-ton chiller from G&D Chillers out in Oregon. It's a 2-stage. It's got some neat wiring to it, some neat safety switches and stuff. And everyone kind of looks at it and does the whole, I don't want to touch that because if it goes wrong, I've got nothing to chill my tanks or my room. So yeah, we're going to keep looking. We're not giving up because we think it is a worthwhile project. And I wanted to summarize real quick. So I went through this morning and went from year to date on my energy bills for my electric. And I can tell you that year to date, we have saved 9.7% of kilowatt hours on our bill. And that comes with adding equipment that Keith doesn't know about that we've added, other refrigerators and stuff to the facility since he left. So with growth, with adding new equipment, doing more operations, the savings he suggested early on that we did late last year and early this year, we've accumulated about a 10% savings on the things we were able to do. So it was worthwhile for me. It was educational. I learned a lot about my operation and how it works. And I want to continue getting this thing done to try to achieve as much of the savings as we could.
Okay, fantastic. So let's go ahead and ask and see if there's any questions for Adrian or Keith before we wrap up into the rest of the questions.
Hi, we have a question for Adrian. Has working with Dr. Goosen inspired you to make any other environmental changes unrelated to energy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it brought it to the forefront of our thinking and what we do, you know. So we look at the, you know, all of it. Like, you know, we've evaluated, should we put solar in? We evaluate certainly what we do with waste. We try to recycle as much as we can. All of our glass and cardboard goes to a local recycling center. All of our waste we try to spread back out in the fields where possible. So yeah, I think it's made it a, you know, more of a focal point than it probably previously was.
That's great, thank you. And one more question. How has COVID affected your operations and a focus on pollution prevention?
How has COVID affected the operation? Well, COVID has not affected the operational part of the operation. COVID has affected the retail portion of the operation. And we have had to basically redo everything from top to bottom, how we make sales. So instead of a customer coming in, standing in a tasting bar, doing a tasting with one of our wine tasters, you know, we're not allowed to do that because you'd be standing face to face, you know, talking for 30 minutes and doing a tasting. So we went to all wine flights where you get 4 2-ounce pours of your choice. You can go sit down at your table then or out in the yard. We've had to play within new law and rule changes here in Delaware, which now allow us to do to-go drinks. So all those slushies that consume the energy, we can put a plastic cap on them, give you a straw, and you can go out the door with it. So our increase in sales of those was pretty significant, especially during the summer months. You know, we've had to space people out, obviously, but the actual operational part of what we do hasn't really changed. It hasn't had an effect on the pressing of grapes or fermentation of grapes or the bottling per se. So that hasn't changed. And the second part of your question, I didn't hear all of it.
The second part was the same question, but the focus on pollution prevention.
Well, the focus on pollution prevention, I don't think has changed at all with COVID. I can't think of anything that we do different. We're still taking all of the empty glass and the cardboard to the recycling center directly. We're still trying to spread out the skins and the leftovers of the grapes after pressing, the cake. We're still in the leaves. We still try to spread that through the vineyard. We still are, following all the guidelines that Dr. Goosen gave us for our HVAC settings and stuff. So I don't think it's had an effect or changed anything that we try to do for trying to be environmentally sound. I don't think there's been any change.
That's great, Adrian. I love to hear it. And how, in our last, 10 minutes here, can we get all the panelists to come back on camera and answer our last few questions that there are? And we have a question for Samantha and Mark. Where can we find more information about the calculator and the sustainable value stream mapping?
You can find all of that information on our website, kppc.org/SSB. We've got, tons of resources for the calculator, some webinars on sustainable value stream mapping, as well as a lot of other case studies and a lot of information.
Great, thanks. And for Robin, how were the resources created by Kentucky Pollution Prevention Partnership developed?
Well, we worked together where Kentucky Pollution Prevention Center and we came up with a list of topics. They provided me some technical assistance, bullets, guidance, and then I took their guidance and expanded upon each of the topics, doing a little more of my research. We developed it using, I don't know if anyone else develops their own fact sheets or how they do it, but we use a software called Canva to do it. And it's an online service that anyone can use. And I think there's even a free option if anyone would like to check that out. But after I developed the document, we sent it back and forth a couple of different times to review the technical assistance aspects of it. And then we're even trying to get it where we have the Public Service Commission in our cabinet and the Office of Energy Policy. We try to have those reviewed by them too.
Great, thank you. And a question for Mark Valencia. There he is. How are the facilities doing with industrial stormwater compliance? Are many applying for NEC?
The newer facilities that are meeting, size requirements and things like that are. The producers that I've had to work with, I think there may have been only one or two that are going through stormwater issues. The rest of them are usually part of some other complex, like a shared space with other facilities. But like I said, with our permitting process, if they have applied for any permits, we're completely aware of them, and we like to ensure that they're in compliance with them. I always recommend we also have a small business team within TDEC who can also provide consulting with small businesses, and we work closely with them. So anytime we do have some compliance issues, I definitely like to get them linked up with them. Or if they have any compliance questions, we usually get them talking to each other.
Great, and I just wanted to point out to everyone that there has been a lot of interest in the Tennessee Sustainable Spirits checklist, and we have made that available in the handout section of GoToWebinar.
And we will be working on updating that on our webpage. So thanks for y'all for bringing that to our attention.
Absolutely. And one more for you, Mark Valencia. It says, what about disinfectant use? We in RI have seen quaternary ammonias used in brewing.
So what is the question, just about chemicals that are being used?
It looks like it, correct?
Okay. Yeah, we don't provide any advice on what type of chemicals are used because, you know, we are not experts in the disinfectant process. A lot of the producers that we work with currently use clean in place practices. I'm not too familiar with exactly which chemicals are being used, but we do try to help them on reducing the water usage with that. So within a clean in place process, the initial rinse, if you're going down a line of fermenters, one of your secondary rinses you can use as your primary, your first rinse on another vessel. So we try to reduce water usage in that way. On the chemical side, I've actually been working with the Brewers Association and talking to some of them on what type of chemicals are being used and how they can use it more efficiently. If it's on the brewing side, I do recommend reaching out to the Brewers Association because they have a lot of really good resources on cleaning practices and safe use with chemicals. Additionally, some of our brewers have to work with the local wastewater treatment operators to make sure what they are discharging, like those chemicals, are balanced before it reaches to the wastewater treatment operator. So we actually, part of our checklist is one of those that they are ensuring that their discharge is meeting standards for the wastewater treatment operator. But unfortunately, I'm not too familiar with all the chemicals that are being used in the cleaning process, so I don't want to say something that I'm not too aware of.
Adrian, did you have anything to add from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, what Mark said is pretty accurate. You can try to start cleaning vessel 1 and move that water. So in the winery world, which is slightly different from distilleries and breweries, but similar in a lot of ways, if you had tanks you were going to clean, you would just first do a quick hot water rinse on them just to get large debris out of there. Once that was done, you would mix up a batch of caustic soda with hot water, and you would circulate that from tank A to tank B to tank C to tank D, because while the water might be coming dirty, the pH of the water is what's doing the cleaning action, not the actual water itself. So you would mix up a batch that maybe has a pH of like 12, to be pretty caustic, pretty alkaline, and that pH would maintain itself through a bunch of vessels or hoses, pumps, whatever you're cleaning for the day. And then when you're done with that, you would hold that water somewhere in a final vessel, because as Mark said, you would have to balance that. You couldn't put pH 12 out to wastewater. They would not be happy with that. So what you would do next is you'd mix up another batch of water that's citric acid and sulfur with a pH of probably 2, and then you would run that through all the tanks, which is what we do. That's the neutralization process, and it sanitizes. So the caustic does the cleaning, the citric sulfur does the sanitizing and neutralizing. And when you get done, you mix the two together and you have pH of 7, and you can safely dispose that batch of water towards your wastewater at that point. And then they're pretty happy with that.
Great, it looks like we're at time. First off, I want to say a big thank you to all of our panelists for sharing your expertise and your experience. Also, thank you for everyone for joining us today. We have over 100 attendees, and we really appreciate your questions and your engagement. If we were unable to answer your question, we can follow up in the next few days. You can see there on the slide the date of the next roundtable. It looks like a notification's covering it, but it will be on January 25th from 10:30 to noon Eastern. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.